Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Replay Mega Man 7. In the last part, we took out our final Robot Master, and shocker of all shockers, Bass was actually the Dr. Wily equivalent to Mega Man himself, hence why he even has Treble for a counterpart to our Rush. And now we're in the Wily Castle stages, and I gotta say it outright, I love all of the music throughout the Wily Castle. Some of the best stuff in Capcom's Super Nintendo portfolio is here. It's great stuff. Also, I'm now looking at this, I never realized it, but the background here is very similar to Sigma Fortress in X1 Stage 2. Now the main mechanic with this stage is these platforms. When you stand on them, the lights switch from on to off depending on what state they're in naturally in the room. Additionally, in the case they go through the little part of the wire that's not quite filled, they flip around, you can't stand on them, so you need to be careful, otherwise you're going to fall into the bottomless pit. Additionally, now there's lights that switch on and off whenever you're jumping. Whenever you're in the air, they're on. Otherwise, you can't see much, so just spamming the jump button for tiny hops is the best way to go through this. The Wily Castle on the whole is hard in this game, but not the hardest in the series, I'd say. I'd say that probably goes to, Mega Man 9's on the first run especially is pretty hard. Mega Man 5's that gave me some trouble, I suppose. Mega Man 11's, if you're not used to using the gears, can be kind of tough. I'd say this is maybe top 5, but that's about it. I'd say the biggest make it or break it's for the level design in this particular level are going to be whether or not you got the Super Adapter and Rush Jet, as they'll allow you to skip some otherwise problematic tier survival sections. Gotta give the game credit though, it broke the, at this point, molds that the previous games had set for quite some time, in that we only have the one castle this time around. We're back to Mega Man 1, 2, and 3 logic. Because from 4 onwards, they had this obsession with having a second castle to just extend the game. And well, yeah, well, I'm always happy to have a Mega Man game with some meat to it. Sometimes you just want something that's a bit shorter and to the point. No Cossack stages, no evil Proto Man bullshit, no Mr. X, just straight up Dr. Wily is evil. You're far too weak, Mega Man. Wily may fear you, but I do not. Alright, Bass jumps and shoots still, but now he'll jump left and right. He can also charge a shot that's generally bigger and more powerful. He's weak to either the Super Adapter or Noise Crush, which is where we found him in the first place. He's weak to Shade Man's own weapon. Funny, he faked that when it's his actual weakness. Round 1 goes to you, Mega Man, but I'll be back. Cool, thanks, bye. Wily 1, especially at this point, isn't going to be much of a problem, as I feel the first half is where things are honest to God hard. Mind you, at this point, we're already at the end of the actual stage. Main boss at this stage is weak against Slash Claw, so get that on out. And the boss at this stage, well, there's a reason Dr. Wily took Gutsman earlier. This is Gutsman G. He will cause the ceiling to shake and slowly move downwards, in which case a boulder will drop down. He'll then spin his claw to try and break it into you for massive damage, but you can use the Slash Claw on the weapon, on the block itself rather, to knock it right back into him for some decent damage. Otherwise you can just destroy it using that. The only point you can hit is the head, and for the life of me, I don't know how to dodge his main attack, which is charging into you and throwing you into the ceiling. It hurts, I don't know how you dodge it, and I never have. The only thing I can think of maybe is rush coiling above him before he can do it. But thankfully, Slash Claw takes him down quickly enough if you have a single energy tank that you never really need to worry about dying to him. Well, there's that, and one other factor. Mega Man 7's castle, I think, is easy compared to prior ones in the series for one major reason. You get to go back to the stage select between stages. Each level has its own password. You can go farm for bullets and items if you need to. In fact, between stages, I replenish any E and W tanks I use along the way. This castle, on the survivability angle, is pretty easy. It's why I think more or less every castle moving forward didn't allow you to revisit the shop. At least I don't recall 8's doing that. I can't remember about 9 and 10 at the moment, because that's a detail that I would not remember unless I'm actively playing the game. I'll be real with you. I don't recall 8s allowing you to revisit, and same with 9 and 10, though. Also, I love this song, despite how very Another One Bites the Dust its main riff is. Wily 2 is a bit of an oddball compared to the other stages, in that I think it's the only one that has an outright alternate routes, and it has an outright optional mini-boss along the way. It's one we've seen before, admittedly, but it's an optional mini-boss, which... rare. One thing I can say you should definitely do at this point in the game, though, if you haven't gotten them for some reason... if you haven't gotten at least Rush Jet, I recommend going out of your way to go back to get to Junkman stage and getting that at this point, as it's just going to help you out along the way. The Super Adapter I could also recommend just because it's good for the base fight, as you saw, as well as just dealing with enemies in hard-to-reach places like this particular Sniper Joe. But if you don't need it for the stage, I would say. Unless you want to take the top path, I'd say. As the top path is a bit harder to reach than the bottom path. Ah, my wait is over. This time, the mighty Megaman shall fall. Treble, attack! They stole enhancements from Dr. Light for a reason. Because now they have their own Super Adapter. Bass in this phase still has the same weaknesses, Super Adapter and Noise Crush. He'll move up and down all across the screen, shooting various types of shots, but his most dangerous attack is easily the little sweep he did earlier, because he could do a lot of damage just by touching you during it. But he also will, at that point, charge up and do his own Rocket Punch attack, which really hurts. Don't be surprised if you have to use an E tank during this phase, because honestly, he does a ridiculous amount of damage. With that said, it's a fun fight. Super Adapter is the best way to go, and I think this is also what the basis for the 2-player mode is that I mentioned a part or two ago. I think you're even in this exact same room. Why? Why can't I destroy him? Ah, Bass. Why you don't understand? And that's the last time Bass appears in the castle as a boss fight. Kind of strange they get him out of the way in the first 2 stages of 4, technically counting the final boss stage. But, alright. I think the Wily Castle in this game is also pretty generous about energy pickups along the way. It's not super generous, a la Wily 3, or Mega Man 3's Wily Castle, where there's energy tanks all over the damn place. But there's still a sufficient amount of places for you to restore yourself. Also, like the ones in Turbo Man stage, I forgot to do it here, but you can just outright freeze these fires with the Freeze Cracker. And I would recommend doing that, as since you go back to the stage select between stages, that means your weapon energy is also fully restored. Meaning you can essentially spam whatever weapons you have along the way without much of a worry. The only ones I'd recommend saving are the ones that the boss fights are weak against. I'll be real though, this is seldom a castle I venture through. It's not because I forget the weaknesses or anything, but it's just that Mega Man 7 is one of those games that whenever I go back to it, I'm usually just playing the main 8 stages and then leaving it off there. And to be frank, I'm not exactly sure why. Part of it's probably just that I don't find this castle to be as interesting as prior or even future Wily castles. But I think it just has to go down with the fact of Mega Man 7's quirks are best enjoyed through the main 8 stages and not the Wily stages. With that said, it's time for the boss of this stage, and it's a long one. This is Gamerizer. Weak against the Wild Coil and Danger Wrap, technically. Wild Coil is what it's mainly weak to. The first 2 attacks it's usually going to do are breathe fire at you, and the fire will generally home in on your location, and if you get hit by that, it hurts a lot and does the fire burning. And then it'll do between 1 to, I think, 5 volleys across the screen, which you need to slide under to dodge. However, its most unique attack is that a part of it will hover up in the air while mini turtles come out of its main body, as it's about to. There are 3 patterns this can have, characterized by a number at the top of the hanger. Number 1 will walk forward and jump a few times, number 2 will spin around the room, and 3, which is the hardest to hit, buries itself underground and resurfaces, the tiny turtles, that is. With that said, the most damaging thing you can do to Gamerizer is with the Spotaros that spawn out of these hangars. If you hit them with Danger Wrap, and then boost them into the head of the main Gamerizer afterwards, you will do a whopping amount of damage that I think is the highest amount of damage you could do to one enemy in the game. With that said, it's incredibly hard to do, especially if for some reason the game loves spamming pattern number 3 at you, as it's just outright the hardest to get the tiny turtles into the danger ramp with. I don't like this fight. It goes on for a while. It's not a very fun fight. With that said, the tiny turtles themselves, I think they're called Spotaros, actually, aren't too much of a threat, as while their patterns can take a bit to learn, and they can move pretty quickly, they go down in so few shots from most of the weapons that it's not the biggest threat in the world. Also, since I should probably get this out of the way now, future levels in the Wily Castle I'm just going to jump cut right into since we don't need to see the stage select anymore. And I already mentioned I'm basically just replenishing my resources in between levels. That's about all I do at the shop. Now, something I found out about the game in between parts while looking at the cutting room floor page is that apparently in the Japanese version, roll and auto can also show up at the you get a weapon screens, and they each give different descriptions of the weapons than Dr. Light. I don't know why they removed that from the game, as I feel like that could help teach key information about the weapons, particularly there potentially being one about Wild Coil telling you that if you hold up it'll bounce even higher, which is key information for the final boss, might I add. Let alone Shade Man. That's just kind of an annoying change that I don't know why they did. Otherwise, most of the differences regionally are dialogue stuff, some minor animation changes, things of that nature. With that, we're on to Wily 3. I was wrong, actually, a few moments ago. This is the level that has the two-way splits. I don't know what I was thinking. They even usually show the two-way splits on the map, and there's not one there. There is one there, though. Wily 3 is the level that probably gives me the most shit throughout the game. I don't know what I was thinking the last level. Great song here, though. Although, I'll be real, this stage always reminded me of Sigma 1's latter half in Mega Man X1. Namely because of the vertical structure that we start off with, but also just the way the tiles looks a lot like the section you encounter right after the Vial fight in Sigma 1. I don't know why, it just did to me. Now, you might recall back in Cloudman's stage, I mentioned there being an effect we weren't going to see until later. Here it is. This is the visibility circle you'd have around you in Cloudman's stage in the case you didn't attack that one enemy with the freeze cracker twice. As you can see, it makes platforming more annoying, yes, because you need to be a bit more patient, because if you rush too much, you're probably going to die. But the view cone is so large that it's generous enough to not be dickish level design. Because I know some games would make that way too tiny and just not enough of a help. In fact, I'm fairly certain that Mega Man and Bass would have done that. This is probably the deadliest stage in the Wily Fortress in this game, though, as I feel it has the largest chances of instant death between some bottomless pits, a lot of spikes, especially in the latter half, as well as the aforementioned split pathway. In fact, here we are at the split pathway portion here. To head to the top route, which doesn't have a mini-boss, you want to stick to these timed platforms and just hope you make it on. With that said, I messed up that jump, so I got screwed out of it. You want to get to that platform right above me and slide consistently left and right underneath that platform I'm directly below right now in order to make a jump up to there. No matter what I do at this point, I can't make that, and that sucks, but oh well. And the checkpoint is right there, by the way, so even this death didn't change much. Though for some reason the water changed color in between death, and I don't know why. The closest I can think was that it may have had to do with another death I cut out at the mini-boss. I don't feel like messing with those spikes, so I'm just gonna take the generous way around here. But this does allow me to show off something I mentioned earlier. This is Kanagase again from... or is it Kanagase? Either way, from Burstman stage. As you can see, Jug Shield, super good against it. With that said, we need to be careful here, as now we get a really dickish section of level design where we're still flowing up like back in Burstman stage, but now there's instant death spikes all over the place, and there's even a noob trap over here on the left that you're likely to get caught by because you know you probably want to hang left anyway. from what First Man Stage taught you. That's kind of a dick move, game. Why you gotta be like that? We are coming up on the point where the level design merges, though, and I know in past games I've shown off what the alternate level design is and such, but I'll be real, I showed off the more interesting path, I feel. With that, now it's time for one of the hardest bosses in the game. This is Hanya-NED squared. Weird name, and even weirder origin story. Apparently, Wily found this thing frozen in the ice. This thing's got a few attacks. It'll fire missiles out of its lowest section, which you can use as platforms. It'll fire bombs out of the drums on the side, or it'll fire a gigantic eye laser that is surprisingly hard to dodge if you're on the left side of the screen. Dodging its attacks isn't the biggest problem, though. Hitting it is. The point you need to hit is generally the eyes, and it's weak to two things. The slash claw is its technical weakness, and that means you need to get really up close and personal with the fight to do any damage. With that said, the charged up Noise Crush does more damage. It's just that there's no way to normally use the charged up Noise Crush in this stage. What you need to do is a trick I mentioned when we got it, where if you press the fire button with the Noise Crush equipped and then immediately press slide, like less than a frame later, as you can see there, you slide into the Noise Crush, meaning you get the charged up portion of it without having to reflect it onto a wall. Using that to then shoot the boss does the most damage you can do to it in one shot. I think this is technically a glitch, but I don't think it's one they ever fixed in future ports of the game. Not that I mind, admittedly, because it's a fun way to fight the boss, and there's something very satisfying about hitting the Noise Crush before you're supposed to. The window to do it does take some getting used to, admittedly. I'd say you have like less than half a second to input the slide after firing. But if you just spam it enough, like practicing at like the start of a stage, once you get it down, it's hard to forget it. And it's also because of this, the Noise Crush is a bit of an interesting ability in that you can instant kill certain bosses with it. Namely, Turbo Man, who's weak against it anyway, Spring Man, and one other boss fight. You can fire it before you go through the door to the boss in their stages. And if you do so, it'll hit the bosses before their HP meter spawns, meaning you're killing them at 0 HP, killing them instantly. Speedrunners use it all the time, and it's admittedly kind of funny to do. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 5, we're heading off to Endgame. See you guys then.